Hello, Saints! Today on Christian Conversations with Wala-Neh Bala.
I definitely, I don't want to just blame the family breakdown, right? I think that there were policing issues that caused distrust in communities. Back when my dad was a brand new police officer, if you saw somebody committing a felony like a burglary and running away from you, the law allowed you to shoot them in the back
Wow.
until the Supreme Court ruled that no, you can't do that. It's violent.
Our guest for today is our topic for today is we hope you are blessed by today's Christian Conversations.
How many times have you had the opportunity to share that testimony?
I probably, anytime I have the opportunity, I do. I've been able to speak a number of times at some, like the prayer breakfast that we host here in Easton. I was asked 25 years ago if I would speak at the prayer breakfast by Bob Dunsmore, and I shared my testimony there, but I've shared it with guys here at the office, some of my deputies, my kids, whoever will hear me, I tell them the story because I was not that kid, even though I was raised by a Christian mother. I was not following God,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't have a relationship with God
Mm-hmm.
until my sophomore year of college, and it's changed my life. I mean, I met my wife and have beautiful children, and life's not always easy, as you well know, but when you've got God on your side, you can rely on Him for strength.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and
it
he's
seems,
protected, and he's protected me all these years through
amen. He has.
a
He
lot of
has elevated, promoted, protected, provided.
yeah.
Amen. And we know the verse that, or the saying that God works in mysterious ways. And it seems that your path to law enforcement was a divine appointment, it seems. God's prevenient grace coming before you and ushering you into the role that He has for you. So, as we talked about, law enforcement and the authority that is ordained by God, we're aware, we're all aware in our society that sometimes authority gets challenged.
Mhm.
And in my work, in mental health, I work with, children and families in the community and in our practice that we have here. And I like working with families because you get to see a lot of the dynamics of what's going on in the home and how that's impacting the individual or the child that I'm working with. And you probably have noticed that over the years, perhaps a lot of our youth seem to have less of a respect for law enforcement. And from my perspective, it seems that perhaps it starts in the home where there may not be a respect for the parents, and that translates to not respecting the teachers, and that translates to not respecting law enforcement. Do you have a different perspective, a similar perspective? What do you see in your work in law enforcement with
No,
respect?
yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I definitely see, there's a breakdown in the family, and I think that that's part of it. The part of some disrespect for law enforcement. I also think that, back when my dad in 1960 was a police officer, um, or 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, whenever, I definitely I don't want to just blame the family breakdown, right? I think that there were policing issues that caused distrust in communities. Um, I think that the police, it was heavy-handed. If you just look at our laws, um, back when my dad was a brand new police officer, if you saw somebody committing a felony like a burglary and running away from you, the law allowed you to shoot them in the back
Wow.
until the Supreme Court ruled that no, you can't do that. It's a violation of your constitutional rights.
Constitutional right to be alive.
You know, I mean, it's a violation of your rights. It's a violation of the Fourth Amendment and the 14th Amendment.
Fifth
And,
Amendment, due process.
right, right. Um,
Yeah.
so I think as society has evolved, and police have evolved, I think that, you know, especially today, there's a need for us to connect with communities that my dad's generation was not connecting with. They were there to protect, but were they always there to serve?
Mm.
Um, and I think, you know, there is a breakdown in the family. Um, I think we have a severe mental health issue, as you well know, in your business, in our society. I think more so than I've ever seen before in the 38 years I've been policing. But I also think that if somebody had told me 20 years ago the amount of things that my office now does in the community to connect to the community, to connect to the mental health providers, to substance use providers, to be a part of that team, um, I would have laughed at you 20 years ago and say, no, that's not our job. Our job is to enforce the law.
Mhm.
So I think there needs to be a balance. And I think that we're starting to see more of that balance. And I hopefully we'll be able to see that in the communities that we serve, that we will bring more respect to our profession and to
Yeah,
authority.
amen. And I agree with you. It is that balance is very important. And I think about how difficult it is for law enforcement because there is a lot that it seems that's expected or required. So I also work like in the schools and I think about teachers. And teachers nowadays are expected to do so much, it seems, in addition to simply providing an education. I mean, fortunately, there's some supports now. You have, you know, nurses in the school, you have counselors in the school, you have psychiatrists in the school, you have security guards in the school. But at some point, it seems like teachers were doing it all, like
Yeah.
breaking up fights and giving a kid a meal who was hungry, like a social worker. Just in law enforcement, it seems there is an expectation to do a lot, but fortunately, it seems that there are a lot of supports that are being provided. Like you mentioned, maybe mental health awareness, so that, for example, so when I was in Baltimore City, I'm not a Baltimore City native, but for 4 years, I worked at Department of Social Services as a supervisor in the intensive case management unit. And I got to work with law enforcement because in foster care and also CPS, if you're going in or my workers are going in and they're removing a child, you know, that's not a situation that a parent's just gonna,
Right.
allow a child to be removed. So law enforcement often had to accompany the social workers in those moments. But I mean, we found the collaboration was very helpful because the social workers had their expertise. I mean, de-escalating certain ways, and then the law enforcement had their expertise in safety and making sure things went a certain way that would maintain order. And I know probably a lot of law enforcement, when they signed up for the job, they didn't think like, hey, I'm going to be in this, but it seems like there's more training happening with like emotional intelligence and all that stuff. Can you share about some of that?
Yeah, so we've just in the 10, 11 years that I've been sheriff, the amount of mandated training that the legislature has passed over the years, and I mean, everything from dealing with people with disabilities, mental health issues, and just the support network that we now have with peer support.
Mhm.
Um, you know, when we go on a call now with a mental health issue, we can pick up the phone, call the number. They send people to us to deal with the situation to try to get people their substance use issues. Like just last Sunday, I got a phone call from a wife
Mhm.
of three kids who said that, and I knew that they were her and her husband were separated. He'd become drug addicted.
Mhm.
Um, and she said, "Hey, will you take a call from my husband? I think he finally wants help." And she had thrown him out of the house. So I get on the phone with him. He says, "I think I'm just going to go to the emergency room." I said, "No, no, no, don't go to the emergency room. Let me send two peers to you for peer support from Grace Street, which is a local nonprofit that helps people with substance use, because they helped him. I mean, he got into rehab that day. You know what I mean? Because they know how to navigate that. So we don't have to be, as law enforcement, we don't have to be the masters of all these things. I don't have a master's degree in counseling or in any of these fields. I just need to know who to call.
Yeah.
And understand that what my role is. My role is, yes, I took the phone call from this gentleman, and I knew who to call to get him help. It's the same on the mental health side. We have resources in our community that just a few minutes ago, I got a text message before we got on the phone from one of the biggest mental health providers in the county. So we build those relationships so they know what we're capable of. I know what they're capable of. And, we don't have to be the master of everything. We just need to know who to call.
Amen. Amen. And
so that's a big change. That's a big change in law enforcement. For my deputies to know, like I had some deputies dealing with a veteran who was really struggling with substance use issues. And, they called and they said, "Hey, we're going to call peer support." I said, "No, there's a group just for veterans that will help with substance use." So we called them, and they drove right there that day to the scene with my deputies, took over, got him involved in a substance use program through the VA, helped him navigate the VA. He had never really been involved with the Veterans Administration. So I think that needs to be more of the police's role than it's been in the past.
Amen. Amen. And I think a testament to your leadership and the implementation of promoting mental health has to do in how it's reflected on your deputies. So many in the community are aware that, I serve on Talbot County's Police Accountability Board, and one of the things they wanted us to do was do ride-alongs. And I had a very pleasant experience. Well, all experiences were pleasant, but very informative. So, for example, I think of one situation where we responded to a call, and it had to do with a domestic issue. I'll just say that domestic issue. And the gentleman so the law enforcement deemed it appropriate to take this gentleman for a psych eval to the hospital. That was deemed necessary. So I was safely in the vehicle while your deputies carried out their roles. But when they returned, I got the update. The deputy had shared with me that initially the gentleman said, "I'm not going willingly. I'm gonna fight you, or you're gonna have to fight me." So then I asked the deputy, I was like, "Oh, what happened?" And because they obviously didn't fight him, because when they came back, he came back willingly. So I said, "What happened?" And the deputy said, "Well, when he got postured up and wanted to fight, we just stood there and just we didn't allow him to provoke us, and they didn't they just stood there. And then when the gentleman saw that they weren't going to be intimidated or maybe reactive, he just complied and said, "Oh, okay." And he put his hands behind his back, and he just went willingly. And I asked the deputy, I said, "Well, why did he do that? Why did he say, I'm going to have to fight you?" And then I'm not saying this is most of the cases, but what the deputy told me was sometimes individuals may want a confrontation, and sometimes they want to be attacked so they can file a lawsuit. Or maybe people sometimes may have struggles and they see law enforcement as you're the problem, so someone else tell me what to do, and then they put that aggression. But if they see that, okay, this person is not ready to fight me, they're calm, they're de-escalating the situation, and it worked well in that case, and they didn't have to go hands-on or even pepper spray. He just complied after he saw that they weren't playing his games or whatnot.
Yeah, that's when you look at law enforcement, that's relatively new in law enforcement. I mean, maybe 15 years ago, we started getting de-escalation training. When I went to the police academy 30 years ago, we didn't know anything about de-escalation training. I mean, other than what you learned as just a regular person, you know what I mean? Like try to calm people down. We didn't have techniques that we're being taught now on how to de-escalate. I mean, the last thing any police officer wants to do is write more reports. And, you know, if you use force, there's another report that gets done, a use of force report, and then it comes all the way to me, all the way up the chain of command to me, and then we review it. We review the body camera footage and all that. And then we'll go back and we'll say, okay, the deputy acted appropriately, but maybe he needs a little bit more, he or she needs a little bit more work on de-escalation. Like maybe we think this could have been de-escalated a little bit better. Law enforcement wasn't doing that 20 years ago. So, I mean, I think it speaks to not only the people that we have here, but just the mandated training. And a lot of people don't realize in Maryland, and I sat on the Maryland Police Training Commission for a number of years, and the Training Commission mandates every police officer, whether you work in the smallest town in Maryland or the biggest department in Maryland, to have so many hours of different training, including de-escalation. I think de-escalation training now is every year or every 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So, and it's not just sitting in the class, it's role playing. We have virtual reality goggles now that we do this virtual reality stuff with our deputies where they're literally, we can change the scenario on the computer that he's seeing and he has to de-escalate it. You know, maybe somebody wants to jump off a bridge, or maybe somebody has a gun and they want to hurt themselves, you know, and try to de-escalate those things. So we're getting more practice than we ever have. But it's really important because there are a lot of people, as you well know, there's a lot of people in our community with mental health issues, some not so severe, but some very, very severe. You know, and I think back to my days in homicide, it was probably between 30 and 40% of the people that were shot by the police. Once we did the investigation, we realized that they had severe mental health issues, whether it was suicide by cop. So hopefully, you know, and you can see the amount of people that are shot by the police, at least in Maryland, has dropped. And I think a lot of that is to do with training and de-escalation training.
Excellent, excellent. And as we talk about challenges to law enforcement, and that transitions to the topic of accountability, which I think we're kind of getting there through the mental health and supports. So I think about, we started with talking about how government is ordained by God, and through God's bestowing of government, or the blessing, granting like law enforcement the authority to, you know, protect these rights that we're giving. And I think about, we're human, right? We're human, and sometimes people will deviate from that order, and accountability is necessary or required. And as the sheriff, and you mentioned the reports coming to you, in terms of holding your deputies accountable, knowing that, I mean, for example, there probably, just generally speaking, there's probably, in any profession, some individuals who probably shouldn't be in that profession. There's some people who are teachers who probably shouldn't be teachers. Maybe they're not patient enough, or some people who are in certain fields. And then the other times it's like matter of training, or just disciplining, or maybe addressing whether it's unconscious biases that individuals may have. How do you approach holding, I guess, your deputies accountable in a way? 'Cause it's tricky, right? Because you don't want to demoralize them, because there's a lot in the society that comes against law enforcement, but then you don't want to ignore certain situations where a person may not be a good fit, or they're doing something where it's like this.
Thank you for watching today's Christian Conversations. Stay tuned until next Friday as we continue this blessed discussion with our guest. Have a blessed week, and we will see you next week, Friday.